Hello, folks. Welcome back. So we will continue from where we had left off last time. We were discussing about prarabdha, which is the potential collection of actions that are the results of actions that are going to induce even more actions. And we said that this is kind of a gray area, and some people may believe it, others may not, but it doesn't really matter from the context of where we'll be going into. So we are going to start looking at the next character in this chart. And today I have had to do some adjustments with my monitor and my screen. So I hope there are no hiccups, but let's see how it goes. So the next in our chart is not somebody who belongs to the family tree, the Kaurava Pandava family tree, but is a equally important person, equally important role that we have to understand, not so much in the context of the entire Bhagwad Gita, but from a Mahabharata standpoint, and that is Dronacharya. Dronacharya was the guru, the teacher of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. And he made them adept in the science of warfare. In the parlance, in the context where we are analyzing the symbolism that is there, there are two types of knowledges that Vedanta or any religious kind of person might uh, look into or might classify knowledge as. There is that which is worldly knowledge, and we can say to a certain extent scientific. And then that is that which is something that one realizes of oneself by intuition. Now, there might be some people who might call this as transcendental knowledge, but I want to refrain using these kind of words because they tend to tune off certain people. And honestly, frankly, there is no strong definition for that word. There aren't enough kind of uh, proof, proofs that you can come up with. There is a lot of matter of conviction and subjectivity in there. So we'll try and refrain from that. Nobody needs to take offense at it saying, that they believe in this or not. You can continue to believe it. And if not, either way is fine. So there are these two kinds of knowledge. One where you have kind of a moral, ethical knowledge that is there, and somewhat spiritual too, I can add to that. And then there is the material knowledge where you understand the physical laws that are there in this world and how they influence, interact with each other. But basically, we can clump all that together into the category of worldly knowledge. Now, what is worldly knowledge? It would be that knowledge which helps us to earn our daily bread or earn our living. That's what we do. We use this knowledge to support our livelihood. So Dronacharya represents this kind of knowledge, and typical word used for that is apara knowledge in Sanskrit terminology. You will find this word if you study the scriptures further. You will come across this word here and there. So Dronacharya is a representation of that kind of knowledge. Now, here too, you can easily be able to reason that there are different kinds of knowledge. So you might have a person who is highly skilled in intellectual knowledge, and there might be somebody who might be skilled in physical kind of activity. That is also a type of knowledge. You might turn out to be a nuclear scientist, or you can be turn out to be a very skillful player in some sport. They are both kind of skills. So Dronacharya represents those kind of things where you, for instance, let's take the case of the medical knowledge, or uh, commerce and accounting knowledge. So you have got in within that, you have got different levels that are there. You might have somebody who does basic accounting, bookkeeping, and then you have got a chartered accountant, CPA, company secretary, and you can apply that to engineering and nuclear physics and medicine or whatever. But there are different degrees of knowledge, levels of knowledge, and you find that when Drona is teaching this knowledge to these people, these pupils, there are degrees. So there's Arjuna is better than somebody and somebody else. So there's hierarchy, and Arjuna is quite up in that hierarchy. So is Karna, and there are some other people who are skilled in different kinds of skills, and we can do the mapping of their skill to some other things, but there is no need to do that. There will be far more interesting things that we will run into when we see how the actual interaction is taking place. I need to pause this recording for a moment. Sorry for that. So that is what Dronacharya represents. He is equipping people, his pupils, to go into the world and make the most of it. Okay, now let us look at the next character that is there, which is actually his son. And because I have changed the position of my laptop and monitors, I don't know how it looks like for you. I have to be looking on the monitor on this side, unlike last time. I don't know, maybe it looks the same when it's recorded. So Ashwathama, actually I've got a typo here. It's not Ashwantama, it is Ashwathama. Nevertheless, Ashwathama is the son of Dronacharya, and he has got one specialty that I think nobody in Mahabharata has, the specialty that he has, not even Bhishma, and that is that he is immortal. He doesn't die, he cannot die, however you want to look at it. He is immortal. So what does that mean? Again, I've been telling all along that all this is symbolism, all this is metaphors. You cannot take this as face value. Some people they might be able to justify it in some way. Uh, good for them, and there's nothing right or wrong in that. But where there might be, if there exists anybody, there was very few people who can claim that they have seen somebody who is immortal, who cannot die. Everybody knows that who is born must die. That is a fundamental equation of life. It is the fundamental truth that one needs not ask any proof about. It's known. So how is this character here that cannot die? What does he mean? Well, what it means is Drona is the person who is giving out to his students the skills, the necessary skills to live the life in the world, and the product, the result of exercising those skills is our day-to-day life, our comforts in life, the things that we benefit from after we use our skills in our daily life. We earn money out of that. We buy comfort living things out of that. And what Ashwathama represents is this part of our life is endless. You There might be a few who are satisfied and content with whatever they receive, but most of the time you will want to have something. You know, even before you might desire a few things, and even before you get them, you start wanting to have more things. Now, this is not necessarily from a negative standpoint, but this is just, you buy one type of car and you need to get money to buy that car and you struggle. Now you have got the skills, you are equipped with skills that Drona has provided you. So you do your work, you go to the office, you slog, or whatever you do, you like your work, whatever is the case, you get money, you earn money, and your first car, you take a loan, you get the first car. And even before you get it, you are already thinking about what your next car is going to be, or that one is better, and so on. It's just the way life is. So it shows, or Ashwathama is that part of life, that part of the process where the results that this apara knowledge gives us is limitless. You that there is no limit. Look at where the world has reached today from about 50, 100 years back. What science has given us, it's endless. About 25 years back, who would have dreamt of this smartphone which doesn't need a keyboard and all that? That is Ashwathama. It is the endless stream of the results of products that come forth by the exercise of the skills and world laws that are there that influence matter and energy in whatever way they do. And we know this is never going to end. Even before one product is out, the other is enough said about that. You get what I'm trying to say. So that is what Ashwathama represents. And why am I going into such length about what Ashwathama is? And well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but in the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagwad Gita is part of what is called as the Bhishma Parva. Parva is kind of a big chapter in the Mahabharata. The war took place for 18 days. And each of the people that the generals that the Pandavas had to face, they were formidable. They were so invincible that it was virtually impossible for anybody to think how do you defeat this army. And most of the people know the story, so I don't want to spoil the surprise, but Krishna takes Arjuna and the Pandavas to all that, and they keep overpowering these generals one by one. And when it comes to Drona, what technique, what method do they use to overcome the power that Drona is laying on the Pandavas in the Kurukshetra? They convince him that this knowledge that you think is immortal is only in a, particular viewpoint. It's just perception. That is not really the case. And you find that they I don't want to get into that story too much, but there is an elephant by the name of Ashwathama, and Bhima kills him, and they somehow manage to convince Dronacharya that this knowledge of yours, the product that this reveals, which is Ashwathama, is in fact not there. It is dead, and that is, see, this Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita is two things are happening here. One is a statement of facts, what happens, and the other is a guide about the steps one needs to take in this spiritual journey. We have not yet seen what the goal is and all that. We are going to come to that. But in general, these two things are happening. And it is narrating um, a running commentary. You do this and this will happen. You do this and this will happen. Or you have done this, therefore this has happened. You have done this, therefore this has happened. So these two things are taking place. And you got to be careful when you read sentences in the Bhagavad Gita, what is what. So in this case, the minute one realizes that the product of this knowledge is not what it seems to be, you lose the or it loses the influence it has on you. You are no longer that impressed. You might still continue to do it, but it no longer has that sway on you, which is what it represents. That Dronacharya is rendered helpless once he has been made to discover that Ashwathama is no more, or this kind of thing, this perception of longevity that is there for the results of the kind of knowledge he imparts, he becomes perishable, if you will. Okay, I don't know if we will get a time to get into that. If we do, this is a very large, big topic, very interesting topic. A lot of it has got a lot of mm, connotations on how we lead our life. Good parts, it helps it a lot. So it one of the main things of Bhagwad Gita is how to um, release the stress that everyone faces in life. There's nobody who doesn't have stress in life, in the kind of life that we lead. So this is a important thing, that a tool. All these are tools. The teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, they are tools. So this is one important tool that you can use to address the situation in life. Okay, enough said about this. Let's look at the next thing. Okay, now I have included Krishna here because obviously he's the main character or the main thing why we are learning this. And just this topic in and of itself is something that one can talk about for months and years. We are going to restrict it to just to I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, I don't know, something like that. So this will be strictly the slice of Krishna that is influencing Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. That is strictly what we are talking about. And this is somewhat from a Vedantic standpoint as well. What Krishna represents is are two things. There is the his role. It is such a poor word to use, role, but nothing else is coming to my mind. He is what is called as the witness consciousness. What does that mean? It means that one needs a substratum, a, a platform, a steady platform on which things take place, a receptacle, some kind of a base. Because for things to live or for them to move or do what they do, it has to be in contrast, in the relationship with something. And that something, if you drill down, it has to be constant, because otherwise if everything can be relative, it's at some point you have to have a fixed reference. We are going to get into a lot of this later in the Mahabharata. So that is why in the Bhagavad Gita, that's why I don't want to get too much into this at this point. But Krishna represents that witness conscious. So I'm going to give one or two examples just to make this emphasize or give an idea of what this means in the relation to the spiritual life of man and Vedantic view of spiritual life of man. So a very popular example that is there is that of uh, electricity, computers, hardware, and software. So you have got a computer that has got a hardware, it has got a monitor, and it has got a keyboard, and it has got a hard disk. In and itself, it cannot do anything. So you need software to run it. If you have got an operating system, it has got programs running on it. So just computer by itself cannot do anything. So you need these other things on top of it. And they actually do the work. So you have got a calculator program. You've got a calculator, and then you enter 2 plus 2 and it gives the answer 4. How does that happen? Well, you've got a screen, you've got a keyboard, and then you've got a software program that takes these two values and gives but the moving parts that are there are the keys because you need to enter them. And although you cannot see with the eye, the thing that is moving inside are calculations taking place in the computer programs. But what you also don't see is powered by the battery inside it. In case of computer, it will be electricity. So electricity is running, and this is a rough parallel. The electricity itself is not involved in the keyboard or in the programs. They kind of have their own existence. But without electricity, that existence is meaningless. They become alive once electricity is introduced. It is not doing by itself, it's not doing it. It is there in whose presence things happen. This is a very classic Vedantic view of the witness consciousness. This witness consciousness name is also a very typical term that is you will find in Vedanta. Sakshi. Sakshi is witness. Witness cause witness conscious, the word witness, it comes from the word Sakshi. So in the presence of consciousness, things happen. A, and this is a very, very big topic. We'll be covering it through the entire Bhagwad Gita. So what I do want to bring at this point in the story, and I don't know how many of you remember this, but when it was deemed impossible to avoid the war, and there was a scramble to put for put together forces in order to get into this battle, Duryodhan and Arjun both approached Sri Krishna for help. I think I've mentioned this story somewhere, but there's some details that are there in it, and I don't want to get into too much details here. But Krishna is sleeping, and Arjuna goes there, and okay. So what happens is both of them go for help. What Krishna says is that it is me and my army, two different things. It is a very important distinction. So he says that you both, he tells both of them, you can either have me or my army. And what about me? I am only going to be there as a witness party. He's actually a charioteer. I am going to be there as a participant, as a charioteer, as a witness. I will not partake in the battle, and I will not be using any kind of weapons. I will not kill anybody, and nor will I go and influence the from a warfare perspective what is happening. This is a hidden, a veiled reference to this witness consciousness, and his army is the dynamic part of the creation of this world. His army is that dynamic part. So we know the story that Arjuna said, Krishna, I obviously it's no brainer. I want to go with you. And Duryodhana takes his army, and things happen. And that's a different Mahabharata story, and we are not getting into that. So Krishna is there all the time in his background, and without his presence, nothing can happen. Without electricity, programs won't run. You might have a very great program that you have written to do something. It is useless without the electricity. You can have the best eyesight in the world, and you can be the best, fastest runner in the world. But if your body doesn't have consciousness, it is useless. These things are useless. So in the presence of consciousness, the presence of life, things happen. That is what this is. The second part that is there is he is also the representation of the Upanishadic teachings, which is basically unfolding this complexity of life that is there, which actually has come out of something really simple and basic. So Upanishad first, they go from bottom up and they come down again from top down. So they take a concept and they explain Upanishads how complicated all this has become, and then they go back and saying it looks that complicated, but here really it is that one small simple thing that is there. So he is representing this Upanishadic teachings, and he walks us through it. And Arjuna asks him questions, and he answers those questions, which are questions that follower of Vedanta comes across. And one of the things that that Vedanta or Hindu religion, uh, they the technique, one of the techniques that is used to understand religion, philosophy, and practice it. There is a three-step process. I don't want to get into it too much, but you it's pretty common sense and reasonable. You listen to something, you hear the laws, whatever laws, you can listen to Newton's laws and you can listen to spiritual laws, whichever laws, and then you apply logic and you try to understand them, get convinced. This is what it is. So this is the second step. And then the third step is you experience it. So this is very, very fundamental. And I don't know, it's probably something different from most other religions, that Vedanta actually dismisses postulates and laws or statements where all these three cannot be met. So if you satisfy two conditions and a third condition of experience is not met, Vedanta rejects it. I don't want to digress too much, but Shankaracharya says in one of his commentaries, as you may have seen so far, that I'm refraining from using, um, these are stalwarts, they are grand people, but I'm deliberately, unless it is in context with the Bhagwad Gita, I'm deliberately not using specific names. But in this case, I think it might behoove to mention this. He says that even if there are 1,000, I don't remember the exact words here, but even if in the Vedas and the Puranas, if 1,000 times it has been stated that fire is cold, I'm not going to believe it because that's contrary to my experience. Uh, this is kind of interesting because on the one hand, it has been said that whatever is in the Vedas is truth and you should accept it. But uh, Shankaracharya points out that there are these three steps. It should stand, and I'm taking a very extreme case. Most of the times, these three do work. Okay, so yeah, because we are talking about Krishna, he is the main character that is really expounding this uh, Upanishads for us. So obviously, we wanted to talk more about it. And I have got a slide that is coming later down where I am trying to tie together all these things that are happening. So let me go to the next slide that is there. Okay, and this is a complicated character, and this is a kind of hidden veiled 2-3 levels deep veiled reference to what this means. This is Amba. So I don't know how many of you remember, but Amba was this princess from Kashi who, oh God, this is really complicated for somebody to understand. Bhishma had brought her to Hastinapur, and she had to go back. And this bottom line is that um, she wanted revenge from Bhishmacharya. She wanted to be the cause of his death. And so she was, she, there's a long story. She basically took birth after birth, and then uh, she was waiting to get an opportunity to be part of a battle, or whatever means it takes, to be able to be the cause, or herself or himself be the cause of destruction of Bhishmacharya. And we, if you recollect, we know what Bhishma is. Bhishma is the sustaining capacity. He is a slice of Maya which is supporting this whole creation. And how do you tackle that force that is there? This force is so powerful. So one of the things is continence here, and this is again to be taken in the right sense, that it's not just at a physical level, it is at a spiritual and mental and emotional level. You need to be able to focus on just the right kind of things that are needed in order to understand the spiritual truths. Again, this is a topic that we'll explore at length as we delve into different chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. So let's move on to the next character that we have. I think I had um, talked about this earlier, that the there is this theory, which is a very, very obvious theory. There is no new thing over here, that there is cause and effect. Everywhere that you go, there is cause and effect. You are playing football, you kick the ball, and you are the cause. And then the ball is going to go, depending on the force with which you have kicked it, is go and land at certain point, which is going to be the effect. So if you take this very simple case and you apply it to the way this body and its functions have been created, so there is something called as the causal body. We don't have to get into the details of all that, but there are three kinds of bodies. But basically, we have got a, a cause enveloped in some way. It came to be about because of various reasons. So we have got one cause, and the way the effect that has come out of the cause is a compound effect. And whatever we see here, the three sons, actually the four sons that Kunti got, and even for that matter from Madhuri, they are kind of the various effects. And why this cause is happens to be because of which the effect is there. We can talk about this for a very, very long time. And I'm going to take slices of this as we go to the entire Bhagavad Gita and discuss it, or we can run through it. But one view that Vedanta has, and we do not have to subscribe to it right away as is, but there is this theory of reincarnation where it um, it talks about the cause and the effects in the form of karma and the fruits of karma. Fruit is a really special word that gets used. Phala, it's called phala. More than effect, it is called phala, which is actually a better word than effect. So this cause, this karma that is there, is going to produce a result. So if you kick the ball, that's it, things are out of your hand. The ball is going to go and land wherever it lands, right? You can maybe control before kicking the ball that, just about when you're going to kick, you can stop, maybe. There are so many things driving the reason why you might want to kick the ball. But all these accumulation of forces that are there, which have resulted in you kicking the ball, have resulted in that action, when the result of that is this ball being somewhere. So if you apply that here and look backwards, the Vedantic claim is that the reason that you are born is because you have karmas, you have accumulated karmas from past lives, or it could be even this life. But if you're talking about this life, then you cannot really talk about birth. But if you're talking about birth, they just extend this analogy to pre-birth or before birth. You have There are some karmas whose fruits have not been exhausted yet. So somehow they have to be exhausted. And this theory of reincarnation just is a nice way to explain that away. And you can believe it, you don't have to believe it. It doesn't affect us much. But that is in one aspect where this you can explain away this that there is this causal sense because of which all these different things have come to place, come to birth, and because of that, they are again accumulating karma. So that is why this is a vicious circle. You have the past karmas whose fruits have not been exhausted because of which you are born, and the minute you are born, again start making karma and again start accumulating the fruits, and you may not finish, you may not exhaust the fruits of those actions, and so on and so forth. Not something that we want to get into, at least not right now. Maybe that's a topic for another day for somebody who is really keen in it. Okay. Now, Drishtadyumna is our next character. So, Drishtadyumna is the son of Drupad. Drupad had a daughter and a son, Draupadi and Drishtadyumna. And Drishtadyumna is the general of the Kaurava army. Uh, I, I could also talk about this for some time, but I don't think I don't want to do that. But essentially, because we went over what Drupad means, and we went over what Dronacharya means, and we went over what Ashwathama means in this battle of Kurukshetra. It so happens that when when Dronacharya is convinced about the death of Ashwathama, now you know what it means. It means that this this unlimited products, the fruits is kind of not the right word here, but the effects of this different kinds of physical laws that are there in the material world, the the fatuousness of these results, when that has been known, it actually takes away the sting from it. Is a sting. You may not believe it, but it is a sting that is there that these laws lay on us. And this Drishtadyumna is the final effect that takes place. And he actually, his very existence is for the termination of Dronacharya. That is why he has been born, procured. He has been come of a yajna. I think I mentioned that earlier. Okay, that is that. Let's see. Um, Virat is another word that represents the world in its one of its last material forms. Um, we can talk about this like other topics. We can talk about this for a long time. But we'll just go to the crux of it, to the gist of it, and then we'll move on. So, how much time do we have left? We have got a few minutes left. I don't know if I can go up to the next topic, but Virat is the world in its final, there is nothing final, but as we know it, at least in the current state that we are in, the world that is the physical world that we are in. So when, uh, if you take the scientific theory that is there behind the creation of this world, which is the Big Bang theory, and there are a couple of things, and since there are only 10 minutes left here, I think I won't go into the next topic because that is going to take some time. But I will go over this one interesting point that is there. that um, Arjun and Sri Krishna, they are Sri Krishna is telling this Bhagwad Gita to Arjun, 18 chapters long. And the question that gets raised sometimes is that what are the others doing when all this is happening in the battlefield? What are they doing? So, and there are many different explanations. One of them is that Krishna, had got his power in him to make time stand still. And for those who want to believe it, it's fine. But I do want to give you a parallel here that when the creation happened, or it's still happening, it was a big bang whenever billions of years back. Energy, this big bang, this energy, exploded, and there were a ton of things that happened in this explosion. This energy gave rise to matter. Matter collided, it again pulverized, became energy again, reconnected, rejoined, so on and so forth. Dust particles are formed, they came together, collided, collated, formed rocks, and so on and so forth. The creation took place. And it is in excruciating detail. You will find how things happened, and in the if you do the scientific research here. So one of the things that the scientists were curious about is if that's it, creation has been done. Is nothing else happening now? But the interesting revelation is that it is continuing. It is still expanding. The universe is expanding. The point that I want to make here is that the actual process of explosion and this universe is they have measured the diameter of the universe, which is, I don't know, millions and millions of miles. So light years, let's say you can't measure it in miles. It is in light years. So this so many light years big universe. Earth is like a small dot if you consider Milky Way, this and that. But the actual creation, the explosion, it took place in seconds, maybe even less than that. Is what the theory is. It didn't go on for years and years. There's some later cycles took a long time, but the actual explosion piece of it, it's you might even experience it when you happen to have a firecracker. You light it up and it explodes, or something you may have seen in movies. The actual explosion, the after effects are not, but the explosion is in a fraction of a second. There's a lot of things packed in that one moment. It looks as though so much things have had that they do happen, but from a time perspective, it is not really that much. Anyhow, so this when things settled down, and then there was a final formation of this world. That is what Virata is there, and I don't think we are going to touch upon anything that Virata is doing in the entire Bhagwad Gita, except that his name is mentioned in the first chapter a couple of times. Now the next chart that is there, and this is the final chart from the symbolism standpoint, and this is an interesting chart that I deliberately sliced out about how all these things that we have gone through and we have identified these different characters. I have taken a slice of those characters to explain how our life experiences are. And I've almost come to the end of the time that I had. So I'm in two minds if I want to do this now or not. Mm, Well, let me talk about this a little bit, and we'll continue next time. So the senses, they acquire information from the external world, and then they let me annotate this. Annotations, where did it go here? So, okay. Let me see if this. Okay, so from the external world, you get stimuli. So what is the external world? Things that you see, hear, touch, and those are the kind of world. But if you have eyes and your retina is damaged, we know that even with the eyes, we are not able to see. So we know that something else is happening. And as a matter of fact, in a dream, if for some reason, God forbid, but something happens to your vision, and when you dream, you still see things. So there is this capacity to view and then this physical interaction with this world. There is kind of two different things here. So we get stimuli from external world and then they enter our subtle body. This is what it is. So from the external world, our eyes, nose, those are the physical actions. This is what karna represents, the body that is there. And then they go into the next sensory bundle that forms our complementary layer to receive the stimuli and to process it. And I am using scientific terms here and not using Vedantic terms. But in Vedanta, there is three kinds of bodies. There is Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira. They are Sanskrit terms, and we can roughly relate it like this: that there is a physical body, and then there is this sensory layer inside where information is collected from senses, and it is converted into a form which can be processed by something else. In out of itself, this nervous bundle, this bundle of nerves that is there, Sukshma is not capable of interpreting and having the ability to have conception. It doesn't have that. It is still taking a stimuli, converting and forwarding it. So here, if you notice that this is in dotted, so we may be deliberately focusing on something in order to know that particular thing, and we may not. It might happen as a reflex action. It is like many times that happens. That is why Bhima is in a dotted line. And then it goes further up, which is where it hits the pieces of the mind where another refinement of this knowledge takes place. But even here, final knowledge doesn't take place. There's plenty of logic to prove that this is indeed the case. And we will get into it in a lot more detail when we are going to look at the Bhagwad Gita. And then finally it will go, and this is, I've shown it in red, but this is really a gray area where cognition takes place. So you can see all this happening, but you will notice that all this happens on a canvas, and that canvas is consciousness. Cannot you cannot do any of these things unless you are conscious. And this is a very, very crude. I find I've got this pet peeve that this word consciousness is so diluting the Sanskrit equivalent, which is called Chaitanya. There's two words actually. There's Satchitananda that is being used, and there's word that is more dear to me in this context, which is Chaitanya. And the English translation for this is consciousness, which is, for somebody who doesn't come from a Sanskrit background, it actually betrays a very poor meaning of that word. But for lack of a better word, that is what it is. So this is the canvas on which, without which this cannot happen. In the presence of consciousness, all these things happen. And that is not that difficult to understand. We know that if somebody is unconscious, these things do not happen. So the part where this flow of knowledge happens, the texts, the religious texts, there are different, at least 2 or 3 major flavors in which this is discussed in great detail. We might go into a little of this here and there. There are 5 koshas that are there that Taittiriya Upanishad first talks about it. In Viveka Chudamani also it has been discussed. I don't want to throw about words and confuse, so I will not do that. However, there is one particular Upanishad that I do want to, I'm actually 5 minutes over time, but I'm going to keep going because I don't want to lose this thread here. There's one particular Upanishad that I do want to mention in especially this context. Let me clear this annotation. So, okay. And let me stop this annotation. I don't know how to stop this. Okay, there you go. So there is a Upanishad called as the Kena Upanishad, and this Upanishad is not very big. It is probably one of the smallest Upanishads that is there, unless it's Mandukya, but it's one of the smallest Upanishad that is there. And I told you I will refrain from taking names, but this one thing I'll tell you that Shankaracharya is kind of the authority. Most people know about him. It's again, for lack of a better word, is kind of a little bit dangerous because once you read Shankara, it is so difficult for you to think something else. You know, he's like he's so systematic and thorough that for you to think of something else becomes difficult. Nevertheless, he has written not one but 2 commentaries on this Kena Upanishad. So anyhow, so in Kena Upanishad, the student asks the question. The Upanishad goes, it's basically listing down the mind, the prana, the talking, sound, speech, hearing. Who is doing all this? Is who it is that sits behind these organs and doing all these things is the question being asked in the Kena Upanishad, and it's a very interesting Upanishad. We are not going to get into the details of this. So um, we will conclude our session today. Thanks for listening to this, and we will meet again next time. Thank you. Bye.